Hello and welcome to O3 Drop. I'm Poopy, aka Craig, here with my lovely co-hosts Brice and Smithel, and we are joined today by the one and only Karol from LSS. You know him from Session Blood, you know him from Dev Talks, you know him from the Armory deck gameplay videos. Karol, thank you so much for being on. We're super excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
So first up, I'm gonna demand first comment here. You are lucky to be on the other side of the world, because if you were anywhere closer to me, I'd be kissing you on the mouth right now for what you just did to Katsu. And I'm giving you all the credit for that. I have been on the last 24 hours on a ride with just the ups and downs of every card reveal for me are high,
Yeah.
and this is the highest one so far. I am so happy as a Katsu player to see where you guys are stewarding this hero, especially after all of the recent, we don't need to rehash the past. We just need to retrace it. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm super happy with that. So thank you to start off with. If you had nothing to do with designing the card, you can
Hey, I'm happy
can
to
take
take
credit.
all the credit for that.
Yeah.
No, I think it was very clear that there are so many Katsu fans out there, and with obviously Bonds had to go because of Zen, and it was
Are you guys hearing him, or did you lose him?
Connection
hey,
issue.
are you guys there?
Yeah, we're here now. We had a little bit of a connection issue.
We lost you for a second, but I think you're back.
Yeah. So you're saying Bonds had to go?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Bonds had to go because of Zen, but it was such a pivotal card for Katsu as well at the time, and he just needed some love. And this is a card that hopefully all the Katsu fans will find a way to utilize in so many different ways. It's not just to enable Dishonor; it also gives Katsu so many kind of ways to utilize other combo lines. So it's going to be interesting how
Yeah.
the player base uses it for sure.
I definitely see myself as, like, I don't know what sibling I would be in a sibling hierarchy, but unwilling to share my toys with Zen. Just like, no, they have toys. Like, this one's got to be for me. So I was really happy to see that this is Katsu specific. And also, I've just always been jealous of Shifting Winds of the Mystic Beast, because that is a really cool card that I was always just like, oh, why can't Katsu play this? But yeah, we are now entering hunted season. We have Armory deck Jarl that is out. It is in players' hands now. Looking back on this year, what do you think has been the biggest highlight for you?
I have to say this year has been a massive kind of change for Flesh and Blood. I mean, if you think about the meta game, even for Classic Constructed, when it started at the start of the year, you still had Dromai. It's actually crazy to think that heavy hitters came out this year. If you look about all the changes to the game, and I have to say, for me, the highlight has been seeing the reveal of the Mystic talent. I think it's got a lot of fans. It's rubs some people the wrong way, but at its core, I think the Mystic mechanic, or the inner chi, has been it's just been awesome. Like, I honestly, personally, really love the way it plays out. The heroes are very strong, but if abstracting from that, the way the mechanics play out, for me, it's been great to see how it's been received, and also that trailer has been epic.
Oh, that
So, yeah.
trailer was amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
I think the hunted one may have gotten me more excited, because I've never been like, I wasn't around when Uprising came out. Like I
Mhm.
joined right after Dynasty. So I was like, I
Mhm.
don't really know if I'm that into this set. And then I saw that trailer. I was like, I've actually always been a fan of Draconic Heroes. Like that's always been my
Yeah.
thing.
OG
Um,
Draconic fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well, I
gotta
think
see
that's like
the
sorry, go ahead.
Hunted, for me, the Hunted storyline in terms of the lore has definitely been um
Mhm.
one of my favorites, I think.
mhm.
Purely because of the whole like assassination moment. I feel like that in Dynasty has been
Mhm.
just like,
Mhm.
whoa. Even even from the dev side, it was not something we're expecting at all. Just like developing this emperor hero, and then like when the set comes out, as the emperor just gets assassinated, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. That just happened.
I
I
think
was
it's
say like
go ahead,
as a
Chris.
dev, does that kind of like does that break your heart? We're like, oh, okay, like we're working on this hero, we're doing all this testing, and then like the lore comes in, it's like, no, he's dead. It's like, no, wait, we don't get to explore him any further in the future. It's just this is the
Yeah.
emperor, like like
Yeah,
like,
it's
like
definitely like kind of want to wait, but he's still legal in Blitz, right? It was just like just making sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely those moments that when there's a lot of back and forth between us and the creative team, where sometimes the dev team influences the lore a little bit, and sometimes the creative team and the lore influences the mechanics a bit. So um, it's always interesting how it all ends up working out at the end, for sure.
Mhm.
So that's kind of interesting to me because like does that kind of sounds like, has there ever been a situation where you have an idea for a mechanic, developed a mechanic and brought it to the creative team and said, figure this is how we want it to work, figure out a way to make it thematically match with either something new or something existing?
For sure, for sure. I can't think of any specific examples right now, but there's definitely been cases where that has happened. It's like you guys go figure that out. Yeah,
Make it look pretty. We got the math down. You guys make it look pretty.
yeah,
let,
yeah.
let me ask this too before we get too farther because we're talking a little bit about the dev team and kind of like the creative team and things like that.
hmm
Can you give us like a very high level overview for maybe those that don't know what the differences are between the various teams in LSS and kind of you and your role and where you fit into kind of the whole puzzle
hmm
for the kind of the game that we all love?
Yeah. So the development team, we work very closely with the designers, which is James White, Brian Gottlieb. Those are those two are the kind of the the people with the ideas who create as designers. They just create the ideas for the cards. They create the whole sets, concepts, and a lot of the time we, as the design team, as the development team, get presented with uh, their concepts for a product, for a set, like basically a group of cards, um, which may or may not be fully complete when we get them, which is kind of cool. But we basically have to figure out whether their vision can be kind of molded into something that is balanced, that is thematic, that is um, simple. I feel like that's a really big one where um, we just got to make sure that things are digestible as well. When you look at a card, does it make sense? Is it intuitive? Um, does it fit the theme of what it's trying to do? And
So you translated Brody Spurlock's card.
kind of. That was a bit of a headache. I'm not gonna lie. I remember the first few times I saw it on stream, I was just like, yeah, I still don't get it.
Yeah.
I feel like that is absolutely a great example of something that we had to make more digestible, for sure.
Mhm.
The I had to read it 10 times before and like play with the card before I was just like, oh, this is what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on that, I've been curious. This is there a minor, like a very minute detail that you take pride over on any specific card? Like I'm thinking of a cost or a defense value where you're just like, I saved the game because they were going to make this cost 1, and I said this needs to cost 2, and you people don't know what I sacrificed for you. Is there a card
Yeah.
out there that you're like, it could have been something completely different, but through hours of talking to people, we came around to the right distilled version of what it needed to be?
Yeah, for sure. There's countless examples. It's actually kind of funny because as devs, we tend to be very opinionated, and we always think that what individually, whatever we think is, it's just going to be the best way to go. And so there's definitely some epic discussions that happen in the dev room. I guess for me, something that I'm proud of was kind of in the Dynasty time when the initial Dynasty brute map, for example, none of the cards had a defense value, like none of them blocked, and that kind of continued from, I think, in Everfest you had the attacks and started in Monarch kind of thing, and I'm like, I'd be keen. I'm a Rhino main since way back, and I've always loved defending as a brute. So I slowly kind of chipped away at the map, being like, what if this card defends for 3? Maybe we could go with that. And then over the course of that particular product, I think I've managed to just flip every single one of those cards into a defend 3. And I was like,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, I will say, if you put any defense values on brute cards, they're going to be a shrine to you in Pittsburgh, because I would say the
Oh, yeah.
Pittsburgh scene is very brute oriented.
Mm.
To the
very
point,
brute heavy. Yeah.
like so anything that you are doing for brute love, you
Mhm.
will be getting all kinds of love from the Pittsburgh area here across the world.
And as an Acilio player, I gotta say, if you want to toss a little of that our way, I mean, Comet Storm's great. I love that it blocks, but maybe 1 or 2 more. No.
Now, let me ask this question too. When we're talking about the testing of cards, this has been a big year, we'll say, for Flesh and Blood in the terms of pre-con kind of products, like the Armory decks home run. I think they're amazing, and I love everything that you guys are doing for that. But a question that kind of popped up in my mind is when we talk about heroes that don't exist outside of maybe these pre-con products, like Jarl or even Terra for the first strike decks. What is the testing process like for kind of these one-off heroes that are outside of a main draftable set? And do you consider how's it going to play in the Blitz scene, or how's it going to play in the CC scene versus having to test or develop an entire main core set for the game? Is there a different thought process that you go through, or is it kind of hey, we go through the same steps either way?
Yeah, I think you touched on a very important point for the dev process, which is different formats, and that is a big challenge for us to make sure, especially. I think the trickier thing is actually like main sets where you have young heroes, old heroes, and they have to perform in the limited format, the Blitz format, the classic constructed, and we have to be mindful of living legend as well. If anything, I feel like the armory deck heroes and the Blitz kind of like Terra, for example, I think they make our job a lot easier actually by being for example, right now with Jarl and Terra, you have the young hero and the old hero kind of thing. So kind of it makes our job actually a lot easier. But yeah, it's not. We still dedicate a lot of time to make sure that it fits correctly into all the formats it's going to feature in for sure.
And on those limited formats, when you have such a like rich card pool to pull from, and I think of Mistvale with Crouching Tigers and stealth cards, and then in this upcoming set, it looks like we're going to see more stealth cards, possibly contract cards. How do you feel about deciding which cards get reprinted that just fill out a set? Do you often have the feeling of like, no, let's do more, let's add more, or are you a bit more conservative and say we have the tools, we don't need to keep adding more and more commons, let's just use what we have and it'll work?
Yeah, so our main focus by far is to create kind of the best experience when it comes to limited as we can. And when you talk about reprints, I mean, a lot of our sets these days have cards that we pull from the past a lot. And you mentioned some of the kind of the Tigers Matters cards, whether it's from Dynasty or from other products. Um, a lot of these cards have been a consideration. A lot of them have, we looked at all possible ways to create basically the most engaging limited format as possible. I mean, another consideration is the slots we have available to add new options for players. So, um, for example, if you look at the ninja, like all the ninja cards, there's a limited number of kind of majestic slots you can put in there. And it's it's nice to kind of give players new tools to play around with. Um,
Mhm.
but in saying that, I think every card that's considered, the a lot of the dynasty map has been considered basically to how it fits for the limited format, and what we ended up with is basically what we thought would give the best experience that this format can give.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of cards out there that I think, uh, as a player, I want to see cycles completed. I want to see, give us blue growl. Benji can handle it. It won't be too bad.
Yeah.
You know, um, but it's interesting to see uh going through this. Like, I remember Blessing of Key was one that really surprised me in the Mist Veil format, getting a reprint and thinking
Mm-hmm.
like, well, where is this gonna fit into this set? I mean, we've got this ninja that's going very wide. And then I saw someone throw a tiger for like 12, and I was like, ah, Zen's a guardian now. I get it.
Yeah.
So just that way that uh, it opened up a whole new breath for the class in the limited format, because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, more tools to continue to do what you're already doing well is great.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in Rosetta, we see it the best of, yeah, you can get all the decomposed cards you want, or Verdance, you can just get all the arcane stuff you want, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to touch Earth at all, except maybe to pitch for your staff. And
Mm-hmm.
having those cards that exist maybe outside of the most obvious approach really
Mm-hmm.
opens a setup, I think, for a lot of players for that creative expression when drafting. So I think you guys
Yeah.
did a great job on what you've chosen to bring back.
Yeah. I'm very happy with how Rosetta panned out for that particular reason. Just giving options to players to kind of do whatever they want to do with drafting a hero, or whatever way you want to engage with a product, I think is really cool. And I always push for kind of like synergy based um, tools within, especially limited format, where you could have two kind of bad cards next to each other and be like, well, these aren't going to get picked, like the kind of 13th, 14th picks, but when you combine them together, all of a sudden they do something cool. So that's
Yeah.
something that I've always kind of wanted more of in the limited experiences. So it's not just kind of you raw numbers that you pick a card whichever has the highest number and you just play that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm really happy that Rosetta does have that kind of um, you can do different things basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of Blue Fry and Acilia, where it's like, yeah, as
Mm,
Aurora, I'm not like super stoked about,
mm-hmm.
an attack for one with Go Again, but in Acilio, I'm like, that amps. That
Yeah,
does amp.
exactly.
Like, I'm okay with that. Um, yeah. Uh,
So that
so go ahead, Bryce.
yeah, so that was, there was a lot of talk about reprints and older cards in that
Mm-hmm.
last bit. What about future sets? Like when you're developing for Hunted, how many sets ahead? Like, obviously, you're not going to have the entire set developed, but
Mm-hmm.
do you go into a set with sort of like at least an idea of where some of the future sets might go that
Mm-hmm.
you can try to comprehend? Hey, is this going to break something in the future that we might already know about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like even with the information we have and don't have, there's um a lot of our job is to kind of try and predict, be like, hey, is this effect if this effect gets more support, like is this card going to break? Or um we have to be mindful, especially with open-ended cards. I think Berserk is a great example of a card that at the time was fine. We're just like, okay, just an open-ended draw a card. What can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's at that point, I remember in Dynasty, we're already kind of like, oh, you know, this effect's so cool, but it can cause problems down the line. But I think it's and that is a judgment call that we just have to make, being like, hey, is it worth enough giving this fun for a like period of time and potentially have to address this issue later on, or do we address it right now? And that's that.
And
So
and when you say open-ended cards, do you mean like, for example, cards that don't specify like your next attack costs one less, but just
yeah,
say attacks cost one less?
yeah,
Things that don't necessarily have a definitive cap on
exactly,
their
yeah,
power level.
exactly.
Or
So
conditions?
Mhm.
so like Art of War, all your attacks get +1. Mordred
Yeah.
Tide, you just make how many tokens you can. High Octane. Um, these kinds of cards are just so exciting because there is no
Mhm.
ceiling. Because if you can continue to kind of play towards whatever the reward is of the card, you just keep on getting a benefit.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, like trading card game players just love doing exciting things. So I think it's important to have these cards out, but at the same time, yeah, we try to be mindful of how they can be pushed into directions that are kind of problematic.
Mhm.
Now,
Feels like over 16 sets. That's comes with practice, right? Like, I'm sure there are things in retrospect you could have looked back on and said, maybe if we would have known what we knew today, we wouldn't have went
Yeah.
that way with that card.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I still think card like that's like my example of Berserk is something that was so much fun for the time being. I feel like a lot of players would have enjoyed the card, and um, it had to be kind of addressed for the future of the class. But
Mhm.
it's it's nice to have fun while we can. I think.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Now, whenever we're talking about kind of these open-ended cards or these things that kind of get tweaked or edited as you go, you know, how often, I guess what's the way I want to say is, when does the red flag go up in your head of saying something needs to be addressed? Is it just, hey, we've done something once and this seems broken, or is it,
Hmm.
well, if it's easy to pull off, consistent to pull off, that's when we address it. How is it able to be distinguished between this is just a strong effect or this
Hmm.
is something that we need to take action
I think it's definitely if it has enough hurdles. I think it's when it's actually when it's not just like, oh, I'm gonna draw this card, I'm gonna put in my arsenal and just wait till all hell breaks loose. I think
on?
I personally like cards that make you work for some sort
Mhm.
of strong effect or something that's would be seen as kind of like over curve or like kind of like doing more damage than the what you might think. So that's definitely kind of a way to balance that. Um,
Mhm.
and also you can kind of see the cap based on kind of the flesh and blood hand size. I mean,
Mhm.
how much of a ceiling can you achieve with the 5 cards that you have available, the 4 cards in hand and 1 in arsenal. And um, there's a lot of ways you can you can kind of add these caps. I think cost is a great one. Um, if Art of War costs 3, for example, or if Berserk costs 3, all of a sudden you're decreasing that ceiling of what's possible on one turn cycle. So, yeah, there's uh, uh, so the same with High Octane, for example. If High Octane didn't draw the card, then all of a sudden the card is go, goes from something that is kind of best cards in your deck to something that you probably wouldn't even consider playing. So,
Mm.
um,
Now, is there like a checklist that you're going through of saying, okay, if we know something needs to be addressed here,
mhm,
do you look at like the cost first? Do you look at like the attack value first if it's an attack? Do you sit there and say, do we edit the text of the card, like the feel of what it's trying to do?
mhm,
Kind of, because I imagine that would probably be a difficult decision to make of where do we need to change this to get it,
mhm.
tuned into where we want it to land.
Yeah, I think as devs we're quite aware of. First of all, we try to identify all the levers we have. So basically, what are all the little things we can adjust? Whether it's the cost, pitch, attack value, values in the text, defense value, and different levers can achieve different things. When you take a card from a red pitch to a blue pitch, all of a sudden it's a lot easier to put into your deck. For example, it's a lot easier to um, include, even if the effect might not be as powerful. Uh, Costing is also, a massive lever. If you adjust the cost, um, the more you increase the cost, sometimes even switching a cost from a 0 to 1 can turn a card from being overpowered to being like maybe even underpowered. So there's a lot of,
Hmm.
I think as devs we often joke that we wish we could have reduce the power by zero point 0.5 or reduce the cost by
Yeah.
0.5 because
Yep.
the kind of the trickiest thing is that some of these decisions are so impactful that yeah, it does become tricky.
I,
You have to sometimes think outside the box. Like you said, kind of think of the text box itself and how can that can be adjusted. Um, uh, some of these things are kind of like you can think of the effect and kind of like an attack. Does it have to be an on hit? Does it have to what kind of conditions do you need to attach to it to make it not as powerful? There's a lot of ways, tools at our disposal, but at the end of the day, it still can be very tricky to kind of
yeah.
find the sweet spot. But it's so
And how
satisfying when we do find that sweet spot.
on the flip side, how do you know when it's time to like break out of that? Like, do you just come in one day full of an energy drink and you're like, we're breaking this flesh and blood matrix. This is a 2 for 7, like,
Yeah.
two cost 7. We're done with 2 cost 6s. This is Command and Conquer +1. Like, when do you feel that it is appropriate to switch it up? Either for the sake of majestics or legendaries, or just to add something to a player's kit that they need. How do you know when it's time to step outside of that sort of framework?
hmm Um, Things like attacks and you know, pumps, for example, it's quite easy to compare to the Matrix, like you said, like
Mhm.
a 2 cost attack usually attacks for 6 at red. And
Mhm.
um, the trickiest thing is when you're trying to evaluate how much value a very unique ability has.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like that's definitely a tricky one where you have, for example, an attack with a very powerful on hit or very powerful effect, and you try to evaluate how much that is, how much kind of like numerically how much that is worth. I
Yeah.
think Snatch is a great example of like on head draw card. Does that really cost one point of defense? Like, and that's what makes the card so powerful. Like, so in saying that, the interesting thing is like Majestics are usually the ones with the most kind of um, unique abilities. That's just the nature of the game. But because of that, they don't come in cycles, which makes it easier to adjust based on like the pitch value. There's a lot of kind of play around we can do to with the matrix itself. Whereas I think the hardest things to actually
The one that comes into mind for me that I can't imagine it was an easy card to design is Chorus of the Amphitheater, right? 2 cost, 4 arcane, instant speed, you can discard it. All of your actions and instants will deal an additional arcane damage. And that to me is one where we're talking about, open-ended cards. Yeah, the open-endedness of that is pretty it's there if you can keep drawing cards, if you can keep doing something like an Arc Lightning, obviously not available for Wizards, but definitely seems like a card that doesn't fit into something very simple of, okay, well, this is a 0 cost without go again. He's gone.
A few moments later.
Hey,
guys,
welcome
so
back.
sorry,
Welcome
I can't
back.
get my computer to restart. Hopefully, I can somehow adjust the screen on my phone.
No worries. I know that I went too far with my question. I asked too much. I was
whoa! I think I crossed the line. It's just like
I said
straight.
Chorus of the Amphitheater and you left, and I was just like, oh, okay. I guess it was hard to design.
James White's drones heard too much and they're like just popped their computer.
Yeah. But I was specifically bringing up a card that to me it has on multiple levels what seems to be a very difficult development process. Chorus of the Amphitheater, because it's got a 2 cost for 4 arcane, but it's also got the instant speed ability of discarding it, and every time you would deal arcane damage, you're dealing additional damage. And Wizards are already in this, wild, maybe less open-ended than they were when Kano had tomes. But I mean, that is, I heard people calling it like the Art of War for Wizards when it first came out, and it was just a discard. And so the process of going through something like that to me seems a lot harder than saying, well, weakest link, it attacks for 6, and when it hits, you look at their hand and you discard an instant. Right? That to me is okay. It's a powerful on hit. We know how it plays with these other cards, but it fits within the matrix pretty nicely. Whereas Chorus of the Amphitheater, it's a card that I look at and go, what the hell do you make of that? Like, how do you begin to say what the power level of that is? So I think just reiterating just how difficult I think those like common and rares are, maybe in comparison to some of the splashier, cooler Majestics that are necessary, but can usually be distilled to it's their on hit that's powerful, or it's when you play it, it does this, but everything else is maybe a little bit more neatly within the space of fairness.
Yeah, Craig, I'm glad you mentioned the Chorus of Amphitheater because it actually is a card that illustrates one of, in my opinion, the coolest kind of, I wouldn't call it like a development lever, but kind of like a design direction for me, which is cards that you discard from hand for an effect. And I think Ripple Away might have been the first one, I'm not sure. And the wind-ups as well, and heavy hitters. But effects that only that you can't arsenal. I think that's really important. Is that by kind of giving cards the ability to be used only when you're in hand. And I think, Ripple Away is a great example of something that just, as a kind of counter card or a hate card, I think it could be too powerful when you can just sit on it in Arsenal. And I think that's
Yeah.
that's a key thing here is, if Chorus of Amphitheater, if you could just sit on it in your Arsenal before you could use it, it can start doing some unintended things.
Mhm.
But because some of these abilities are locked into only happening from hand, like for example, with Ripple Away, it's a lot harder to kind of, you have to hold it in your hand, for example, against a Mordred Tide turn or something like that. It becomes a lot harder to use it for those effects. So
Yeah.
I'm actually really, really glad we opened ourselves up to this direction of design, and also gives us developers another tool to kind of tackle some of these really powerful effects. But yeah, when you're talking about the power level of the card and how do you balance it, one of the ways is, like I said, the whole like you have to have it in your hand when you want to use it, but also you can look at what it actually targets. And Chorus of Amphitheater is very specific on what sources of arcane it amps and what it doesn't amp. And it's worded. I'm not exactly sure the exact reading of it, but basically it hits non-attack action cards
I
and
believe it hits actions and instants.
actions and instance, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
I
very
don't know if it's
intentional.
non-attacks. You would
Yeah.
know better than I would. Why am I? Yeah.
Yeah, but the wording is very, very intentional for
Yeah.
hitting exactly what we wanted to. Yeah. I'm not sure if you ever wondered why it's worded that way, but one of the things we didn't want to do is there's a card called Brainstorm that
Yes.
that gave us a bloody headache. Honestly.
I have been trying to figure out Brainstorm Acilio, and making it 3 cost is keeping
Yeah.
me from doing it. It's keeping me from
Yeah.
figuring it out. But
So for the longest time, Chorus of Amphitheater was actually open-ended, and then we realized that Brainstorm actually it's the hero itself that deals damage. So it gave us a way to kind of be like, okay, well, if actions and instants are the only sources of damage in Rosetta, we can word it that way and kind of not amplify and not amp the damage from Brainstorm, which was kind of like an example for you of how you can restrict things to kind of stop some of these ridiculous effects from happening.
yeah. And Brainstorm actually brings up something that I think is really interesting. With obviously this year sort of being like the year of the ban, right? And how that affected Rosetta being the first set afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm curious how internally you guys felt with a hero like Acilio, where you
Mm-hmm.
probably had ideas of, okay, this deck there's going to be a version of this deck that's on Brainstorm. There's going to be maybe a version that runs more Art of War. Was it uh difficult for you guys? Did you feel like some of your work had kind of been undercut at all there? Or were you prepared and said, we always knew this could happen. We gave him the tools to do what we need him to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
fine that we don't have anything to worry
For sure, for sure, it affected some of our previous work, but I can tell you that the general dev team sentiment was this change just gave a breath of fresh air to Flesh and Blood, and kind of just taking it back to the back and forth roots of the game was something we were all very happy about. And now, obviously, there are some decks or strategies that got affected by that. But in the scheme of in the big picture kind of thing, I think it was the best thing we could have done. And
Let,
you know, like Craig, you're an Accelio fan. I can tell you now that it's every single hero we look at and the way they got affected. We're very aware of that, and honestly, if you played Accelio and Living Legend, you could see that it was doing some crazy stuff. So,
there's
in that
nothing better
particular
as an
case, it might have
Accelio
been for
player
the
than amping
best.
like 25 and then drawing like no spells. That has been my Living Legend experience of like, oh, here we go. Or just realizing like having a crazy Blast to Oblivion turn and you're like, oh, that my sigil is my spell here. I wasn't supposed to draw a card. I was supposed to blast for 30 off this
Yeah.
no, I've enjoyed Living Legend Accelio immensely, and have had nightmares about what the format would have looked like with Kano with his full card draw suite. So I
Right.
imagine you guys was probably a monkey off your back for development.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Let me ask this question too. When we're sitting here talking about card development and you know how we want to look at heroes and how they behave and what you're developing for. One of the things that I think I like the most about Flesh and Blood, especially recently, is the introduction of the expansion slot in the packs, where you can sit there and say, "Hey, this is going to be something that maybe doesn't fit with this set, but we're giving support to other heroes."
Mm.
How do you decide, or how do you develop cards that are going to be kind of expansion slots in the future? Like again, somebody that loves the Olympia like myself, you see things like, hey, visit the Golden Anvil, or you see something that's coming up. Do you as a team sit there and say, here's a card that maybe was on the cutting room floor before because we felt like it didn't fit thematically in the set, so we're going to bring it in later? Or do you sit there and say, we look at the meta and everything that's going on in the game and then develop cards and tweak cards and designs that help draw out maybe what a hero's missing, or help buff somebody else, or change the metagame up that way?
It's definitely a very fluid process. Basically, all the examples that you gave of, maybe this hero needs some help, maybe we need to address this in the metagame, all of these points are a consideration. And the cool thing about expansion slot is we, as developers, do have a great dialogue with the design team being like, hey, Olympia needs some help, or this some of it is more archetype based than hero based. Maybe this archetype is not really seeing as much play as we would like, or we need an answer for this class to this problem. So it's really cool, kind of for us as developers having that ability to be like, hey, we need this slot filled, and we need this slot filled, and it's been yeah, and it's kind of, and we come to work the next day and bam, here's an idea. So honestly, I have to give massive props to the designers on how on point they have been with the expansion slot in particular.
I love that you guys have provided both illusionists and mechs with like a pretty full arcane barrier suite through there. And I think that a lot of people play those cards, especially illusionists, love the calming gesture. But the fact that they weren't in the card pool before seemed like a bit of an oversight of like, well, where do how do you handle these matchups? Is this just a matchup that you lose? Not in the case of illusionists, they were fine with wizards, but maybe mech, it's like, okay, well, how do I handle arcane barrier? Do I have to get rid of all of my evo, which is what I'm playing towards anyway? I think the expansion slot was a great way of putting that in the game and saying, we're not going to make you wait 2 years for us to do another metric set. We're just gonna we know you need it now. Assassins is another one that got it. So I think that's been a great way of injecting really necessary pieces that aren't necessarily splashy. But what I'm curious about with them is, how do you feel as a developer that those pieces are being printed at the majestic rarity? Do you ever feel that, Commoner, for example, is missing out on pieces that it needs? And are those things that you consider, or do you just say, you know what, if we make this any rarity other than majestic, people won't immediately identify it as an expansion slot, and so we have to just say, sorry, Commoner, it's too confusing. You'll get what you need later.
I mean, a lot of iterations of how the set will be printed, currently the expansion slot, it is something that is still kind of testing the waters of how it looks like, what the configuration looks like. And it's been working so far, but it's, I can't say that this is how it's going to be and it's going to be locked in forever. I think it's going to take
Breaking
a
news,
bit of
expansion
feedback from the
slot changing.
community. It's I'm not going to lie, we don't have kind of, half the dev team being like, we need commoner support in the expansion slot. Like, I mean, it's cool to hear different kind of communities talk about these things, and I think honestly, we definitely have been more mindful in terms of commoner support within the kind of the main sets themselves. I haven't thought personally, I haven't considered much about it for the expansion slot, but the way we do rarity between common and rare is definitely influenced by what we think, how it's going to affect formats like commoner. But yeah, in terms of commons in the expansion slot, never say never. I mean, it's maybe it's something that may or may not happen in the future.
I think that it's sort of maybe on my mind specifically because we've had in our local community discussions about what does rarity mean recently with the inclusion of a legendary in the Jarl deck. And I think most people are saying, well, look, you're a new player, legendaries, they're cool. Like, this is a cool piece that you want. But then there's also a camp that says, right, but it's in a sealed product, so it is as rare as the commons in that sealed product. So how, is rarity determined? And I think a lot of people at first were saying, okay, well, Majestics for the expansion slot, it's because not every pack has the expansion slot. But I think I'm seeing that there's maybe more room in that. And I think we seen legendaries in the expansion slot? I think we have.
I don't believe so. No.
No, I'm thinking of Dusk Till Dawn, I think was the last time we got something close.
Yeah, I don't think. I think it's all been M's.
I should definitely know this, but I don't think we.
Yeah, maybe Bright Lights had something close, or maybe not. But I had to represent the commoner homies out there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could see even in the Portland weekend that we're mindful of commoner for sure. And even when the ban announcement, just like adding little tweaks to the format, I think is very much intentional, and it's something we're keeping an eye on.
Now, this is just a question, just simply for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. Are you someone who plays the best deck in the format or the best deck in your heart?
So I have to say, for the longest time, I would play the best deck in my heart. Before joining LSS, I played Rhina religiously. There was a moment in time where the best deck was Dash Control, and that was before Crucible of War came out. And that matchup was and in Crucible of War, Arc Smash came out, and it was kind of like the tool for brutes to deal with items. And before that, I would just whack my head against the wall basically every time I versed a dash play. I'm like, I swear if I just pitch stack all these badging beatdowns and I draw my last hand, I can get there. And that was definitely kind of me back before LSS. Now, within now as a developer, we do have kind of internal tournaments and stuff like that, just to kind of give a competitive check for some of the products we're working on, and I think it's a way for us to kind of be sharper and kind of be more aware of how things play out in a competitive environment. And there have been times where I've been playing the decks that I really enjoy, but more and more I'm just kind of like, I think this is the best deck and I just want to beat the other devs, so I have been trending more towards just trying to figure out the best deck and just kind of put up the best results for sure.
Yeah.
So mastery packs, right? I feel
That's
like a lot of people lost some of the hype around that when we got the announcements of the new armory decks and the hunted coming out. As soon as we kind of heard the news about that, my first thought was like, this would probably be a dream for the devs. I mean, it to me it seems like a way to interject some new ideas that maybe got passed over the first time around. Maybe you had some ideas that didn't necessarily fit, didn't fit in the game plan, and now that the game's matured a bit, this is kind of the chance to catch up with some of that, or to get some of that more support that maybe was missing at first. Is the introduction of the mastery packs, is that something that maybe the devs were kind of pushing for, or is that something that kind of came from the design team to say, hey, we want to put more cards out?
I think it definitely came from the design team. For me, and I think it's kind of the intent of the product is very much giving, it can be, I feel like it can be daunting for new players to come into the game and be like, okay, I'm gonna play Jarl, and I got the armory deck, which I love armory decks for this particular reason, that a new player can just buy this and play the game. But as we reach, set 13, 14, 15, and you're just like, cool, I have this hero, but I need to kind of go back in time and find all these specific cards. And I think hopefully this product really streamlines that process of being like, this is the class I'm committing to. If I buy this product, I can kind of, every card in that product is gonna be something for me, rather than being like, okay, I buy a booster pack and I hope to open a card that actually fits into the class I'm playing. So I do believe it is a great tool for newer players to just kind of streamline that process of trying to get into the game and tailor something for them that is just for them to play around with.
I've been very bullish on that answer, because I think that the idea to me is almost just like, you could call it Guardian Toolbox. It's just like, you like Guardian, you have Guardian, but you might only have really like a specific archetype of Guardian, a specific flavor. And so just being able to say like, no, you don't have to chase through Everfest and Dynasty and all of this other stuff. Just here, all it is in one place, I think is, I got to give kudos to the team on that, of just from a consumer's perspective. I think that's a brilliant approach. I also did hear that it's 180 cards of aura destruction, which I think is just beautiful.
Every single card destroys an aura.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question too, because I know we're getting on time, but you know, you have been, involved and touched so many of the different products, that
Hmm.
LSS has put out. What has been your favorite product or set to have been involved with, and why?
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting question. Something that I always come back to is the uprising. I don't know why, but I just really enjoyed the process of developing the dragons. It was like it felt like we can finally kind of incorporate the illusionist class in a very manageable way into the game, where like the kind of action point starved heroes like brutes, I mean get more so guardians than brutes, but um
Mhm,
can deal with it through the phantasm, through popping them with their attacks. And then you have like you can kind of maneuver through ninjas, or kind of the go wide dicks through kind of like things like Nikria and Yindra and stuff like that. So
mhm, mhm,
I've I think for me, Uprising and kind of the Dromai card pool specifically has been something that I'm really happy with how it turned out. Because we like balancing each and every single one of those dragons was uh and kind of like keeping the flavor and the theme and everything has been a real challenge, but
hmm,
really did definitely that's kind of like part that I'm really happy with how it turned out. um Another one would have to be um like Dynasty, especially with introducing assassin to the game. I think that
mhm,
was definitely a big challenge, because it's kind of like, you know, something completely new that we're adding to the game. And especially something that I'm really proud of was the way that we developed the daggers, because that was another tough one, being like, how do you do something that enables kind of disruption, but at the same time isn't just like pushing damage for the sake
mhm,
of
mhm,
damage. The
Mhm.
wording on the daggers was something that was definitely I'm super stoked with how that turned out.
mhm.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Hopefully next time someone asks you that, you can say adding necromancer to the game, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Speaking of necromancer, there's it's a very not, I'm not gonna go too much into necromancer, but the
Yeah.
the community itself is very passionate and opinionated.
Hmm.
You were talking about the dev team being that way.
Yeah.
Our Discord is just us yelling at each other. Generally, passionately, friendly, but this is a community with a lot of strong opinions about the
Hmm.
game.
It most
Um,
definitely
how
is.
do you internally like keep uh keep things in perspective when you might come in one day and be like, you know what? Reinar's been in the dirt for too long and we're gonna change that. How do you manage a balance when you have I mean, what, 16 classes? I don't even know how many classes. Not 16, can't be.
Mm,
But 30 some heroes, right?
Yeah, it's
How do you
true.
manage all of that? And do you guys ever have to internally kind of say, like, hey, we're going to take a break from the internet for a minute and just focus on what's working? Is
Hmm.
there any sort of like therapeutic response you guys have to dealing with all of the stimulus from the community?
I have to say that I feel like the dev team, like, we have a very tough skin. Like, we're very, I think at this point, we're very resilient to not just feedback, but all kinds of opinions that are out there. It's honestly, it's sometimes we just read some of the comments and being just like, you just gotta find humor in that.
Yeah.
But I think the thing to note is I, f- I feel like the development process is kind of like you can compare it to like an iceberg where like the public only sees what has been released, right? And there's the kind of not really like frustrating, but kind of I wish that the public saw, everything underneath the surface that we as devs have stopped or fixed, but because you never see any of that. So I think we're very, very much resistant to kind of a negativity out there and stuff like that. But it's always awesome to see kind of when people when the fans kind of give us a nod of approval or something. Sorry, my daughter's just here.
Hello.
Hi.
No worries.
She just woke up. Just give me a second. I'll just sort her out. What's up?
I was staying after school.
Yeah, you
I'm
want to go
gonna
to
put
school?
subtitles about the necromancer class. I'm absolutely gonna say that she's spoiling the necromancer.
It'll be out on set 18.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that I love about the necromancer class is like you have, I don't know, a new artwork comes out with like a skull in the background. People are like, oh my god, necromancer.
Yeah.
We figured it all out.
I got Blanche baited really hard. Blanche came out and I was like, I know what the next set is.
Yeah, or like, you see like a piece of map in the background somewhere. We're just like, oh my god, we're going out to the ocean.
Yeah, Truce was the one where people were like, okay, now hear me out. It's like James White personally messaged me with this artwork just so that I would find the breadcrumbs.
Yeah. No, for sure. I actually love community kind of theories and all the insert the Charlie kind of conspiracy meme in the background kind of approach. I love that.
It's fun. Oh man.
Well, I do imagine you got to be getting to school soon here. Actually, no, wait, it's Saturday.
It's Sunday. No,
Sunday
it's Sunday for you. It's but
I don't know why my daughter's just like super into going to preschool lately. So it's like,
I
got preschool today. I can't be mad about that.
I got two little ones myself, and my son asks every day, "Do I go to school today?" And I'm like, "Buddy, it's like Saturday. Like you got this by now. we should have this on the
But he's also 18 though, so that
no.
But we're so grateful that you joined us. It was great to talk to you about this, Karol. All of us are going to be passionately yelling and screaming both of joy and frustration, I'm sure, throughout all the hunted, as we are wont to do. But do you want to give any links to follow you on social medias, any shout outs or anything like that before we let you spend time with your family?
I'm LSS_Karol on Twitter and Blue Sky. I try to post as much as I can. I want to give a shout out to you guys. I think it's great to get some some fresh kind of content, and it's like I feel like as a community we need content for all kinds of things, whether it's super like competitive gaming, but also looking at other formats. I definitely enjoyed the episode you guys did on UPF, and
Derek
think about
came on for
all the other kind of formats like Commoner. I'm glad that someone's looking with finer detail at these kinds of things. So no, I definitely appreciate that.
Well,
thank you.
Yeah,
we love doing it, and we especially when it comes to just like the community. That's what we've been just excited about from day one. Was like we never strove to be like the competitive, Arsenal Pass kind of. Here's what you need to know about the meta. But we've gotten to talk to so many cool people that Dr. Anna Runebabe is one of our favorite people we've had on. We made buttons with her of Flesh and Blood cards one time, and there's so many facets that make up this community. It's really been great for all of us to be involved in it.
For sure. And like as someone with kids, I'm a FAB dad now. I don't have much time to actually play and even going to armories is tough, so
Yep.
and I definitely know that there's so many other people in the same boat who love the game, are passionate about the game, but they just don't have as much time to commit to the full competitive grind kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's good to see kind of content tailored to these kinds of players as well. I do want to give a shout out to all the players out there, especially the opinionated players out there.
All the players except for the CYB players. Go back to your hole. Get back.
No, it's it's I love reading all kinds of feedback all over the place, whether it's positive, it's negative, it's CYB negative, but it's I think all different aspects are still kind of a showcase of the passion the community has for the game. So yeah, I love consuming content and it's kind of like posts and stuff. So yeah, I just continue to post on Twitter, Reddit, Discords, whatever it is. Yeah, definitely be
You heard the
tuning
man,
in.
people. Get posting.
Yeah.
Say, Karol told me to do this.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Cool.
I mean, we can't thank you enough, buddy. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. I'll be happy to jump in. Right after we all the kind of conspiracy theories come true. I'll be able to jump on and be like, I told you so. Yes, we're right.
So once there are 180 Guardian cards that destroy auras, we'll talk again. That's a hard commitment. We're gonna hold you to that. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Yeah, catch you guys later. And yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Awesome. Thank you so much.